The 1980s gave us some truly fantastic number one singles, but you might be surprised to learn that many of the songs we now regard as absolute classics failed to land the top spot. In fact, in some cases, it was what is now considered the signature song from certain bands that fell short. In this video, we're going to look at 20 songs that you probably assumed were number one hits, but sadly, were not. And to clear up any confusion, we'll be discussing these songs based on their UK chart positions. In 1985, the world outside of Norway was introduced to a.ha. by way of their single Take On Me. With one of pop's greatest vocal performances and a state-of-the-art video, this song is without question the first one that comes to mind when anyone mentions a.ha. It's worth noting that it took 3 separate releases of this song for it to make a dent in the UK charts, but they finally cracked it in September of 1985, where it peaked at number 2, only being held off the number one spot by Jennifer Rush and her song The Power of Love. In January of 1981, Kim Wilde made her debut with the song Kids in America. This upbeat number contained a typical synth pop sound of the time, but stood out with a wonderful call and response chorus. As with the majority of the songs on this list, Kids in America is the song that most people associate with Kim Wilde, although it could be argued that You Keep Me Hanging On is up there too. But regardless, as classic as Kids in America is, it could only reach the number 2 spot, being held off by This Old House by Shakin' Stevens. Despite being one of, if not the biggest bands of the 80s, Duran Duran only have a paltry 2 number one singles to their name, namely Is There Something I Should Know and The Reflex, which means that there was a plethora of classic songs to pick for this list, but I've singled it down to Hungry Like the Wolf. Ask someone on the street to name a Duran Duran song and they'll probably give you this one as their response. Released in May of 1982, this song is about as catchy as it gets, and the accompanying music video, which was shot in Sri Lanka, is like watching a short Indiana Jones movie, but shockingly Hungry Like the Wolf only made it to number 5 in the UK singles chart. To make matters worse, it was held off the number 1 spot by the following. At number 4 was I'm a Wonderful Thing Baby by Kid Creole and the Coconuts. Torch by Soft Cell was number 3. Adam Ant's Goody Two Shoes was number 2, and at number 1 was I've Never Been to Me by Charlene. Duran Duran were probably thinking they were never going to land that coveted spot, and while they did achieve that accolade the following year, the fact that songs like Hungry Like the Wolf, New Moon on Monday, The Wild Boys and A View to a Kill all failed to replicate that success still blows my mind. Ask Alexa or Siri to play hit songs from the 80s, and I can guarantee that at some point, Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears will come blasting out your speakers. Released in March of 1985, this was the 3rd single from their Songs from the Big Chair album, and came hot on the heels of their previous single Shout, which made it to number 4. Everybody Wants to Rule the World did slightly better, but stalled at number 2. I think it's fair to say that this would have been guaranteed the number 1 spot had it been released at any other time of the year, because it was up against We Are the World from USA for Africa, and as we saw the previous Christmas, it's impossible to dislodge a charity single featuring as who's who of superstars. While Madness did achieve a number 1 single with House of Fun in May and June of 1982, it's the song Our House that they're probably most well known for. Released in November of that same year, Our House only made it to number 5, where it remained for an astonishing 5 weeks. During this 5-week period, the top 4 featured a variety of acts, with one song remaining a constant in the number 1 spot, The God-Awful Save Your Love by Renee and Renato. The Thompson Twins achieved moderate success during the 80s, with hits like We Are Detectives, Dr. Doctor and You Take Me Up, but for most, the song Hold Me Now is the most memorable. Released in November of 1983, this was the lead single from their Into the Gap album, and while it did reasonably well to peak at number 4 on the singles chart, it really should have gone much further. While the follow-up singles, Dr. Doctor and You Take Me Up, did a little better, reaching number 3 and 2 respectively, the Thompson Twins would not feature in the top 10 again. Slippery, When Wet was the album that made Bon Jovi a household name, and their 1986 single, Livin' on a Prayer, is the song they are most known for. Despite reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, the best it could do in the UK was number 4. It's not as if the British record-buying public were adverse to long hair and loud guitars, because while Bon Jovi were languishing in the number 4 spot, sitting at number 1 that week was Europe with the final countdown. Having released 5 singles during 1981 and 1982, it wasn't until 1983 when the Eurythmics made a dent into the top 40, and dent it they did with Sweet Dreams Are Made of These from January of that year. Despite it being one of those songs that always appears on a compilation of hits from the 80s, it's another of those tracks that you just assume was a number 1 hit. But in actual fact, Sweet Dreams only made it as far as number 2, as it was held off the top spot by Bonnie Tyler with Total Eclipse of the Heart. Initially released in November of 1985, holding back the years was a bit of a flop for Simply Red as it peaked to number 51, but just a few months later it was given a re-release and made it to the number 2 spot, where it remained for 2 weeks during June of 1986. So far, I've been critical of the songs that made the number 1 spot, but in this instance, Simply Red can have no qualms about being second to Spirit in the Sky from Doctor and the Medics. As we just saw with Simply Red, sometimes it takes a re-release to get things going, and that was certainly the case for Billy Idol. Rebel Yell was released in March of 1984 and only made it to number 62. But when re-released in September of 1985, it made it to an impressive number 6. Once again, this is one of those songs that always appears in a Best of the 80s compilation, and it would be easy to assume it did better than number 6. Just Can't Get Enough from Depeche Mode was released in September of 1981, and only made it to a surprising number 8. Anytime I've asked Alexa or Siri to play something from Depeche Mode, this is the song that invariably gets played. Depeche Mode are definitely one of those bands who got better with age, and while they were just boys when Just Can't Get Enough was released, I feel it was good enough to have at least cracked the top 5. In 1984, the UK was introduced to Madonna Louise Ciccone, who was so confident in her talent that she decided to make things easy for us and be simply known as Madonna. Having had relative success with singles like Holiday and Lucky Star, Madonna probably felt quite sure she was going straight to the top with her single Like a Virgin, which was released in November of 1984. Sadly for her, the best she could do was the number 3 spot. While she would eventually get to number 1 with Into the Groove, I think it's fair to say, Like a Virgin is her signature song, and for it not to have made number 1 has got to sting a bit, although getting there was virtually impossible with Band-Aid standing in the way. Simple Minds had been releasing singles since 1979, yet had failed to make the top 10, but in 1985, that was all about to change when they were asked to record a song for the soundtrack from the movie The Breakfast Club. Don't You Forget About Me was released in April of 1985 in the UK, and despite it topping the Billboard Hot 100, the best it could do in the UK was number 7. This is definitely one of those songs that you hear today, and just assume it was a number 1 hit, but back in '85, record buyers favoured artists like Tears for Fears and Phil Collins for the higher chart positions. Having just achieved their first number 1 hit with True, Spandau Ballet would have been quite confident of replicating that with their follow-up single Gold. Released in August of 1983, Gold was an upbeat pop classic, and if I'm being completely honest with you, I much prefer it to True. Anyway, Gold failed to do what True had accomplished and had to settle for the silver medal in the number 2 position. In saying that, Spandau were really up against it for the 2 weeks they spent in second place, as it was the fantastic Give It Up from KC and the Sunshine Band that held the top spot for those 2 weeks. If you watched Top of the Pops during the 80s, you were probably sick of the sight of Vince Clarke. He was involved with Depeche Mode, Yazoo, The Assembly and Erasure, but it's the single Only You from Yazoo that we're going to look at here. Released in March of 1982, Only You is a pretty simple piece of laid-back synth pop that showcases the vocal power of singer Alison Moyet, and it grabbed the attention of the British public as it soared to the number 2 position, only being held off by the German Eurovision Song Contest entry, A Little Piece by Nicole. In a bizarre twist of fate, Only You did make it to the number 1 spot, where it remained there for 5 weeks, but this was the a cappella version performed by the Flying Pickets, just 1 year after the original from Yazoo. Anyone who was a teenager in 1980s Britain will remember the frenzy around the band Bros. Their first single, I Owe You Nothing was a complete flop, only reaching number 80. But the follow-up, When Will I Be Famous, was anything but. This high-energy number captured the attention of teenage girls across the country and made them big stars overnight. Bros Mania had taken over, and despite the fact that a remixed version of I Owe You Nothing did make it to number 1 in June of 1988, it's When Will I Be Famous from November of 1987 that they are most famous for, pun intended. It was not an instant hit, as it took 7 weeks to get into the top 40, but once it did, it slowly made its way to the number 2 spot, where it was unable to dislodge Tiffany with I Think We're Alone Now. Bananarama were mainstays of the British charts throughout the 80s, and while they don't have a number 1 single to their name, they are without question one of the top female performers from the era. The song they are most well known for is Venus, which was released in May of 1986. This high-energy number, which was produced by Stock, Aitken and Waterman, features all the typical sounds associated with the production trio. But as good as it is, it only made it to a very disappointing number 8 on the charts. While there's no question that the main ingredient for achieving a hit song has to be the song itself, there's a lot to be said for timing, and no other band knows that more than Wham. Although recorded in August of 1984, Last Christmas was released on the 3rd of December, and in the months leading up, you can bet your last penny that Wham thought they were guaranteed the much-coveted Christmas number 1 spot with this classic. Unfortunately, Bob Geldof had other ideas, and no matter how good Last Christmas was, it was never going to beat a charity song containing all the stars of the day. In a twist of irony, George Michael played a large part in Wham not making the number 1 spot, as he was heavily involved in the Band-Aid project. As it was, Last Christmas occupied the number 2 spot for the duration of Band-Aid's 5-week reign. If ever there was a song worthy of being a Christmas number 1, it was Last Christmas, and justice was finally done in 2020, when it finally gave Wham that much-deserved Christmas number 1. So there you have it, 20 absolute classics from the 1980s that never actually made it to number 1. Which one did you find the most surprising? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.